Welcome. My name is Astrid Bennett. I'm president of Surface Design Association, or SDA, a membership nonprofit focused on contemporary fiber and textile art. I'm so pleased to welcome you to this week's Textiles Talk, Intercambios, Art, Stories, and Comunidad. Textile Talk webinars are brought to you by the International Quilt Museum, Modern Quilt Guild, Quilt Alliance, San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles, Studio Art Quilts Associates, and Surface Design Association. First, I'd like to share a few housekeeping announcements with you. This is a webinar, so your screens and mics are not showing. We welcome questions. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and use the chat box in order to greet others and the survey for letting us know comments. We welcome questions, as I said, and at the end of this presentation, the artist presentations, we will address questions. We're honored to bring you free and inspired textile talks. We respectfully ask you to be courteous as you engage with speakers, moderators, and other participants. Your chat comments can be seen by everyone. If you prefer not to see notifications from the chat, you can click on the chat button to toggle them on or off. Our presentation today will be in English. For this presentation, you can also enable live transcript, which is in the menu where the chat box is, which will give you a running transcript of what's been spoken. It's not perfect, but it can be helpful, and you can turn it off at any time if it's distracting. This webinar would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. Sponsors include Moda Fabrics and Supplies, Quilting Daily, Aurifil, eQuilter.com, Artistic Artifacts, Clover, Empty Spool Seminars, Misty Fused, attached 9 Patch Fabrics, Quiltmania, Schiffer Publishing, Thai Silks, and the QuiltShow.com and Tourville family. Thank you, all of you sponsors. Today's presentation tells us about Intercambios, an exhibition of collaborative works by 10 artists in Madison, Wisconsin, USA, and the Central Valleys of Oaxaca, Mexico. It'll be on view January 19th to April 10th at the Ruth Davis Design Gallery at the University of Wisconsin. This textile talk is a special one for me. Carolyn Kallenborn, one of our presenters, is a professor of design in the Design Studies Department at the University of Wisconsin and has a long history with SDA. She has been involved with the artists and people of Oaxaca for many years. She and I met up at the International Shibori Symposium held in Oaxaca, which turned out to be a magical and profound experience for me, with its range of indigenous and contemporary textiles, printmaking, and the ethnobotanical garden. Carolyn will lead us in a discussion of this project and introduce our additional guests, Roberto Mata and Miriam Campos, as well as their own studio practice. I'd like to read to you a little bit about the exhibition. This is an exhibition of collaborative works, as I mentioned, by 10 artists in the Madison, Wisconsin, and Central Valleys of Oaxaca, Mexico. This project visually explores the intersections of culture and media and includes textiles, photography, printmaking, papermaking, music, and video. Our collective work asks questions about what it means to cross and connect worlds, life and death, art and craft, and the borders between countries, languages, cultures, and classes. We come from diverse backgrounds from both sides of the Mexico-US border and speak 5 languages. Very impressive. 3 themes emerged: honoring and remembering loved ones and the fleeting nature of life, the potential of migration to both destroy and cultivate traditions, and the importance of shared histories, including shared indigenous textiles. Intercambios started in spring 2021 during the COVID pandemic. Artists from both sides of the US-Mexico border held a series of visual conversations where they presented their artwork and gave studio tours. And at this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Caroline, who can really bring us further into an understanding of what that process and the exhibition is all about. Caroline?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Astrid. It's really great to be here. And so a couple of things to note as we were planning on doing a studio tour as part of this presentation today, but we had some COVID things and the installation was supposed to start last week and just started this week. So we don't have enough work up to actually show you the pieces in the studio or in the gallery and what they look like. So, so instead we're going to show you what it's going to look like, and hopefully you'll be able to come by and see it or see some other images somewhere along the line. Let's see, I think that was the main thing I wanted to get across before we get started. So we're going to kind of walk you through the process of what happened here. Our presentation, we'll start with the introduction. Day of the Dead became a really key theme for this, and actually was a lot of the impetus for this whole project. Roberto was down in Oaxaca with me as an intern several years ago, and another Dakota who's also part of this from Madison. And this actually started out because we really wanted to get Roberto and Dakota down for Day of the Dead. And it's like, well, how can we do that? Well, let's have an exhibition. And so this whole thing sort of grew from that. So we'll talk about that at the beginning. And then each of Roberto, Miriam, and myself will each talk about our own individual studio work. And then we'll talk about how the project progressed. And then we'll look at some of the works that came out of this project. So as Astrid mentioned, we have, there's 10 total collaborators, which is a pretty major group. We have 4 of us from here in Madison, Wisconsin in the US. And then from Oaxaca, we have 6 different people that we've worked with that have a range of backgrounds of, some have traditional practices and some are more contemporary practice. And a lot of them kind of mix up a little bit of each. So, I just to kind of ground the conversation, I think most people are aware now of Day of the Dead. It's a little different than a few years ago. Movie Coco came out, and all of a sudden everybody seems to know what it is. But for those that are not super familiar with it, we want to do just a little bit of a lead into this, because that whole idea of life being fleeting and art that's kind of ephemeral and there and gone are all very much part of Day of the Dead, and was very much an inspiration for this whole project. A friend of mine, Ali, who is the wife of Tito, one of the collaborators in this project, one time said, for some reason, the all-powerful one allows our dead loved ones to come back and visit us for a day. So we throw them a party. And there was something about that to me, just all of a sudden, it makes everything make sense. That's why you go to the cemetery and you have a band in the cemetery and everybody's dancing and enjoying and having good food, and why it's a happy time versus, let's see if this, why it's a happy time versus a time of sadness and celebration. Although it is sad, you miss the people as well. It's not just a party. And at this point, Miriam, are you on or not? She was there. She was having some trouble connecting. She's calling from Oaxaca. So I don't see her on. So I'm going to talk, and when she comes in, we'll try to, I know she might be coming back on. If she gets on, we'll have her start talking about this. So and Miriam, are you there? Cassie. So you can see this is actually this is a video clips of a film I made about Day of the Dead in 2013. And it's just showing some of the background images and things, the celebrations that happen in the home and in the cemeteries. Miriam, are you there now?
Yes, I'm finally here.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
About Day of the Dead?
Yeah, you missed
Sure.
the other. So if you want to just tell just a little bit, we've been looking at images, but anything you want to tell us about Day of the Dead?
Well, Day of the Dead here in whole Mexico is a really important celebration. And for me, I think it's my favorite one. It's about to remember the people who has passed away, and they're special for us. Just once a year, we believe that they come back to that and visit them for just a few days. And we used to prepare special things for them, like food, music, an altar with their favorite food. And we used to do things that they used to like to do in order to remember them with a bunch of love. So I think Day of the Dead is a way to remember not just the death, it's more just about the living that we have the opportunity to share with people who we love.
Okay, thank you. I'll So those were all images from Oaxaca, from various towns. It's a little bit different in each town and place. So we'll come back to that in a little bit and what we did when we visited there this last year again. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background about me. As Astrid talked about, I was very involved for a long time, about 10 years with SDA. I was on the board and I ran the conference, 3 of the conferences that came out of Kansas City. In my own work, I do a lot of garment and installation work, but a big shift happened for me when I went to Oaxaca for the first time in 2004. There's a map up here where you can see there's Mexico City and here's Oaxaca if you don't know where it is. And it's this really kind of magical place where there's an interaction. You see kind of sometimes in the same view, something very contemporary, something very old, and something ancient, kind of all at the same time. And it just, there's always so much to see. It's hard to even take it all in. So every time I go down there, I find I need to go back again. So I've been going down for it's been 15, 18 years now. I go down all the time. When I first went, I was doing study abroad and I would bring students down from the Kansas City Art Institute. And one of the things that really struck me that stays with me very much through everything I do now is watching the interaction between people that were from different cultures and spoke different languages. But you can see down in this picture down here, I love this because these kids don't speak any English and she doesn't speak any Spanish, but you can see in their faces, she's drawing and sketching and they're sharing stories that through artwork, you can communicate and you can cross borders and boundaries in a way that's absolutely magical. And I've never, I've always been amazed with that. I found that I wanted to bring the entire world to Oaxaca with me so they could experience, which just isn't practical. It's probably not real good for Oaxaca either. So I wound up making a film about it so I could take these stories and pass it on to other people. It's both in English and Spanish. You can watch it in either language. From working with artisans, in all of these different kinds of work, I started doing a lot of collaboration in my own work, mixing together my own studio practice with the practice of embroiderers, weavers from various parts of the state of Oaxaca. I do a lot with Tito Mendoza, so I wanted to put a shout out to him particularly. We've done a lot of work together and it's always pretty fabulous. I've also brought down people as interns and do artist interactions. This is Roberto with a paper maker out in the town of Etla. And again, just watching the students, my students or other people interacting with artisans is just as fascinating to me as if I do it as well. And there's this really wonderful thing that happens where you have I love this image where you've got this ancient technology, brand new technology. You've got people from the US, you've got young and old, and and people from Teotitlán del Valle, where many of the traditions are, more than centuries old. They're millennial old traditions. And to see it all in one place together is pretty cool. It changed a lot when every time I went there earlier, people would say, you have to go for Day of the Dead. You got to go for Day of the Dead. Like every conversation with local people would tell me that. So I finally had a chance in 2013. And from that, I also did the same thing where I made a film so that I could help share that experience with other people. I wound up using, whoops, I meant to turn the volume off on this. I also found that my own artwork was inspired all the time, has pretty much since then been inspired by Day of the Dead in one way or another. This was an installation in Madison, and this was the first time that I then collaborated with Miriam, who is now, I've been collaborating with her ever since, and she is a major part of this project. For those of you that were in Oaxaca for the Shibori Symposium, this was an installation that was at the local library, and the projections were on top of this as well. I do a similar altar project a community altar project in Madison, where local people can make altar boxes, and we put them together. Last year, because of the pandemic, we had to go online, so we made a virtual altar project. And with that, I'm going to let Miriam go. It's a quick background of who I am. Miriam, are you ready? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm still here. Okay, I'm Miriam, and I'm from San Antonio Castillo Velasco. I'm also an artist, as Carolyn said before, and I'm very lucky because I'm a part of a family who are involved in the textile creation. So this is a kind of artwork that we develop here in my town. This is the most traditional one. It's all hand embroidery. And as I said, my family and I, we dedicated to this labor from several generations. This is my grandpas, and they have 5 daughters. And with my cousins, we are dedicated to this labor since I remember. The kind of pieces that we made is it started with really simple materials like threads and fabrics, but during the process we use a lot of techniques. So each garment could take to finish some few weeks to several months, and we used to work in collaboration with other women. So many women were involved in this labor. My job is mainly inspired by this tradition. I do traditional work like this. I embroidery garments that I use, but at the same time, I use my traditional work doing something more contemporary or in a different way than we used to do here in my town. I made some textile sculpture, like the flower represented here. This flower is, it was elaborated on the mark of a workshop in the Textile Museum called Human Mathematics, and it represents by graphics with data that I use during my professional life. I'm also a chemical engineer, so I used to do a lot of data, and also do something with another friends involved in for art, like Tito, who is a common friend for all of us. They made this tapestry, and I became into a purse using crocheting technique from my town. I'm also do another kind of jobs like, you can show the next one, please, Carolyn. Like this blouse. This is a very old blouse. It was made in 1960 maybe, and it was pretty damaged when an aunt gave me them, and it was very special for me. So I make some repair work, and I became into life again. Now I used to wearing them. I also do works like this. This is a collaboration between my community and a silver jewelry enterprise. The Tane is the name of the company, and with the help of the Museo Textile of Oaxaca, also we develop a project who use the traditional embroidery, and we became into jewelry, and the little part of the earrings of the sale of this jewelry will help to my community to develop culture projects. So as you can see, my job is mainly inspired by my traditional background, but I use it into something different, and I as this project that I worked with Carolyn and Roberto, and I'm very glad to be part of that.
Roberto.
Hey, hi everybody. So my background is in printmaking. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. My focus is basically visually contextualizing stories of migration, trying to, use printmaking as an emphasis to tell the seriousness of these movements of people from Central America, even to the Middle East, talking about issues and causations of migration, and portraying it on through printmaking itself. And through all the forms of printmaking, I also experiment with papermaking, trying to accentuate the dimensional texture and adding more lifelike visual applications to within itself. So these photos are from the Chazen Art Museum in Madison, Wisconsin, from my MFA show. I also worked on woodworking, multimedia. The next slide. So then I started working in textiles in my last semester in grad school, and I really was drawn to the possibilities of using printmaking onto fabric, but also creating an installation that has this lifelike ability to immerse the space with the silk organza that's in this photo, to talk about stories of individual people who traveled from different countries to the United States, and talking about their struggles, their journey to make it happen and live here in the U.S. So, and that's it.
One, Roberto. Okay. So that's a little bit of the background of the three of us. There's 10 of us total in the project, but this is just a little bit of who we are. So we were supposed to, we were supposed to go down in October 2020 to go down for Day of the Dead to Oaxaca, but the pandemic canceled all our plans. And so we wound up actually starting this instead in the spring of 2021. And since we still couldn't go in person, we wound up doing this by Zoom. So we did something that was kind of like speed dating, except with artists on Zoom. So each of us, this is also bilingual. The three of us here both speak English and Spanish fluently. There are some people in the group that speak no English, and there's some people in the group that speak no Spanish, and there's some that are kind of in between. So we had to set up Zoom where we're all on there, and we had two translators, one translating English to Spanish, the other doing simultaneous translating in the moment. So it was pretty interesting setup. We've recorded all of them, and it's actually pretty cool to go back and listen. But what we did is each of us would put up our work similar to what the three of us just did now, but a little bit longer, and explain kind of who we were, and then talk about what we wanted to do. And then from there, we sort of broke down into seeing, who was going to be who wanted to collaborate with who on what part. And I particularly love this screenshot of these conversations because we had a really good time, and it was so interesting to hear everybody's work and working through the different ideas that we had. So super fun. And then finally, in October, we were able to go down, Roberto, Dakota, and I from Madison. John Hitchcock couldn't make it, but the three of us traveled down to Oaxaca for Day of the Dead. I'd been there for Day of the Dead before, and Roberto had been there in the summer, but he hadn't been there before for Day of the Dead. So we're gonna have him talk about his experience in those first few days here in October.
Yeah, so, it was an amazing opportunity to just be there for just a week, and it felt like it went by so fast. So the first couple of days, in the next image, Carolyn, there was the flowers at near and Santa Nonino. That was used for the altars and different aspects of decorations for tributes and different uses for it. And it was such a unique place and beautiful aspect, and it's very strongly attached to the cultural traditions for the Day of the Dead.
Okay. One more for you, Roberto, then we're up to Miriam. Miriam,
so-
you're coming up next. So
Like, for example, the marigolds and the different types of flowers are used to make crosses, different sculptural, figures, and for gifts for the dead.
Mhm. Okay. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. There's one more for you, Roberto. Sorry. Go ahead.
This one?
It's
So
you.
this is in Teotitlan. We were at Tito Mendoza's house. We were working on, using the marigolds and the different flowers to make decorative pieces for the altarpiece. And in the first picture, it's very elaborate. There's a lot of elements. There's offerings of fruits, breads, all in combination with the dead coming to visit the family.
Mhm. And I'm just going to interject here. This is Tito here, who we've all talked about a lot. We've all done collaborations with him. He's a master weaver. We'll see a little bit more of his work. And this is Dakota, who's one of the other ones that came down with us from Madison that are over here working on the skull. And that's Lily, Tito and Allie's daughter. And that's Allie, who's the one that gave the great quote about Day of the Dead earlier on. So it's all kind of a really great group of people to work with. Everybody's quite interesting. Okay, Miriam, you're up.
I'm here. I'm still here. Well, it was just amazing to have three special guests with us this year. Day of the Dead, since the pandemic started, it was we adjust to the situation. So we used to celebrate in a big scale, but because the situation nowadays, we need to do something a little bit smaller. And this year, Dakota, Carolyn, and Roberto spent some time here at home. We sharing food, which is an important part of the celebration. We also prepared it, and we went to the market to get the stuff, and we also going to the cemetery, which is the most meaningful part, I think, for be with the loved ones. In the cemetery, we went for the whole 3rd of November, the whole day, and we used to decor the graves like this. This is in my town, San Antonino, and that's just a spare time there, just sitting there, share some fruits, and pass time with your loved ones more closer, just to say goodbye and the trip to come back to wherever you are. She's my grandmother. This is the altar we made for her because she passed away last year. So having Carolyn, Roberto, and Dakota this year make this more special because we feel it accompanied with them, and it was a special time for all my family and for them this year. This is the grave of my grandmother, and we put a lot of effort to decorate it and remember her with love.
So I'm just going to add one comment here because Miriam mentioned that things were much more scaled back this year and not very decorated. So when you look at these last couple of pictures you showed, that's like the scaled back version. Which is kind of hard for anybody else to recognize. That her mother was, or her aunt was not happy with this picture because there's not enough fruit and stuff on the table because this was towards the end. But I think for most of us, it's still pretty elaborate. So I wanted to explain so your tia isn't embarrassed of the photos. So
Yeah.
and then you know that your grandmother was well taken care of. So that brings it. So this is sort of the background that we get into this. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the artistic collaborations. So we've got two musicians. John Hitchcock is both a printmaker and a musician, and he's collaborating with a musician down in Oaxaca, and they're sending things back and forth. We've got embroidery, paper making, Moises Martinez with, this is all hand spun silk where they cultivate their own worms and silkworms and grow them. And then it's all dyed with natural dyes. So there's a whole different range of people. And we're just going to go through the ones that the three of us have worked on together. But again, there's a lot more work and we're just talking about a portion of it. So first we'll talk, Miriam and I, we've collaborated a lot in the past, and on this particular one, we wanted to make something coming out of Day of the Dead, really using cempasúchil or marigolds as the jumping off point. And Miriam, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sure.
About marigolds and their significance?
Yeah, as Carolyn said, we use two marigold for inspiration. Marigold for the Day of the Dead is very important because the smell, we believe that their smells guide the dead ones to come again for just this particular time. So the flower is very important, their colorful, their smell. It's really involved in the whole celebration. So we use this inspiration to create our series of pieces. At the beginning, we made some sketches and we discussed about the cycle life of the plants in general at first time, and then decided to go to marigolds, and we decided to represent their cycle of life since the marigold was a seed when they start to blossom and when they're full blossom and dedicated to the people who loves when come back for once a year. So that's what we get the inspiration for this piece.
And then I started out with some pieces I had made in an earlier exhibition, and I wanted to come back and revisit. These are all hand woven, also in Oaxaca, but several years back, and then hand dyed. So I took these pieces here and the drawings from Miriam, and I kind of warp painted I over dyed more indigo dyes, silk screen, and warp painted the threads that were still exposed, and painted these on, and then hand dyed a lot more thread, and then sent these down to Miriam to embroider, which was like magic. And so Miriam, now it's you want to talk again?
Well, the idea was amazing since the beginning, but when I get the fabric, I had to face the reality that the scale of the pieces was huge, and I never embroidered until just some threads, like this open thread work. So it was a technical challenge, and I used just these tools to embroider the pieces, the scissors, really small, and some hooks using a kind of mixture of crocheting technique and open thread work that I use in my traditional work. But it was just surprises to me. I enjoyed it a lot, even if it was so hard. I enjoyed it a lot.
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of the pieces after the embroidery work. There's still been more done to them since then, but this is what they looked like when I picked them up in November, so October, November. So you can start to see the scale of the pieces. And then I took them home and did some additional work and added some other little small elements at the top and a little bit more embroidery down the bottom. And I needed to, because there's the weight on the embroidery, the sections that were heavily embroidered tended to fall in. So I had to, this is for you technical geeks that are here. So I had to add some kind of support lines of to go out to the edges so that I wanted the threads to lay very flat and not be collapsed in. So I had to add that so I didn't get any big gaps in the in between. So you can see how the finished pieces wound up in these extra kind of supplemental lines that are helping hold it together. This is the big marigold piece. It's still folded up a little bit, but then on this one, this is what it looked like when I pulled it out. That's my little dog Paco. And this is the kitchen where I'm sitting right now, but this is, you can see the embroidery of this big piece and some of the detail of the piece over at the side. So again, I had wanted to show you these fully installed, but we were not able to do that because we're still installing this week. So hopefully there'll be another way to share it, but they're looking pretty awesome. So Miriam or Roberto, you want to start?
So my collaboration with Miriam, we started with like initial sketches of how this is going to look like, given with the amount of time we have. And so we decided on several options. To the left image is like my initial illustrated design, possible, you know, just what's going to look like from front to back, using one of my prints as a reference point, using human figures and as an emphasis on migration, and just you know, using Miriam's ability of her embroidery and how she could accentuate that into this gaban. So we used 2 rebosos, which is like scarves for the neck, stitched together. And then she used eco print. So the floral or plant-based material transferred onto the cotton fabric in itself. Miriam, you want to
Yeah. Yeah, as Roberto said, we started to talking about why what was his inspiration and what was mine, and we combined it. We surprisingly we discovered that we have really good combination of techniques and ways to see the piece that we want to create it, and we focus on the opposite things, but maybe not means necessarily the opposite. It would be combined really well, as in the life, like life and death, or men and women, female or male. And we use that inspiration to inspire us to use the rebosos, as Roberto said, that is a female garment here in Mexico, to become into a gaban, who is usually wear by men. And the printed, it was made with traditional plants from here in the region, and the threads that we use to embroidery, it's also with natural dyes.
Okay. So, and then this is, you know, what the pieces looked like finished.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Roberto, you want to go through these next two?
So my other collaboration is part of a series called Cuentos de Migración, or Stories of Migration, using my previous prints as reference points and helpful guides for the artisans in Oaxaca. So for example, this print used in Tito Mendoza's weaving process using cotton, rayon, and just a bunch of other materials all wove together in this beautiful piece. So there's 2 different sides to it. The front is the reference of the print from the previous slide, and the back has the human figures referencing migration, but also the eagle and the snake origin of Mexico, and its you know, its roots of, you know, stories and how it's passed on to other places in the United States, and how it's still holds its stories and through generations.
And just to note, this is all tapestry weaving on this, in case you didn't know. It's very, very fine tapestry weaving. Yeah. Okay.
And this one
Got
is,
some.
is
Go
with
ahead.
Virginia Rodriguez. She does, so this is all embroidered by hand. This took, I think, 4 months to work on. Initial sketches and drafts until like we were finalized with the last image of what's going to look like. Yeah, so the process she did was she used charcoal rubbed on paper, and she basically, traced these images onto the fabric itself. And it was just so fascinating and interesting, and just the amount of work it took to finish this is incredible.
Yeah, and you can see I have a note on here. I wanted to put a detail shot of this. This is all satin stitched with a little bit of outline around the edge. It's very tightly, it's beautifully woven or stitched. And then we'll talk a little bit about, then Roberto and I did some collaboration as well, and he's paper maker as well as printmaker. And so, and we were here in Madison, so we were able to collaborate in a different way. And it was during the pandemic, and there wasn't much you could do except be in studio, so it worked out really well. So we started, Roberto had a couple of, these are large pieces. There's a piece of fabric, a piece of paper that's like 45 by 45. And I was thinking a lot right before the pandemic. I was in Argentina, and in this spot between Chile and Argentina, there's a mountain there that's one of the highest mountains. It is the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas. And up at the top, there's a fossil. And that really thinking about that sense of time from how long it took this little animal to become a fossil. And when it was a fossil, it was a sea creature. It was at the bottom of the ocean. And then, and now it's at the top of one of the highest points on the planet. And it really sort of made me think about our sense of time and human time, and that all of humanity isn't even a blink of an eye for this earth and this mountain. And so that became kind of an impetus for sort of the sorts of things I wanted to address. And so that's where this sort of mountain and scene and sort of layers of history and time came about. So this is my watercolor on Roberto's paper, and then I gave it to Roberto, and it came back like this, which is really cool. And you can see the original stitching. And then Roberto, why don't you talk about this part here?
Yeah, so I just went back on it with oil pastels, some watercolor, acrylic paint. I think during this period of time, we were still like, don't know what's going to happen during the pandemic. It just felt, compelled to do something spontaneously that kind of, we just continued on this vision that we didn't know what was becoming of. So in itself, just creating this piece, and it was very time consuming. Like you said before, Carolyn, like, it does reference time in the sense of like how long it takes to create something while waiting for something positive to come out of this, so we were just working and just, yeah, and it just came out really beautiful.
So then we started stitching on it. So these are details of that. And we really went back and forth. Sometimes I'd paint on it. Sometimes he'd paint on it. Sometimes I'd stitch. Sometimes Roberto would stitch. And we really just kind of played off of what the other one did on top. I don't have like a super great professional photo. Again, we didn't get these up in the gallery, but this gives you the details give you a sense. This is really true to color on here and texture, but this is kind of what the overall layout of the piece looks like. And again, it's big, it's like 45 by 45. And then we did another one called Rift. And again, thinking about these rips and tears that are happening in our lives, like, everything is so unpredictable. And this is like a metallic silk organza underneath. And sometimes those tears actually open up and expose something really beautiful. So this is another one where I did this and then I gave it to Roberto, which then it changes totally, which is the whole fun of it. And it came back like this. And do you want to talk about this, Roberto, a little bit? Or?
Yeah, so just like going back to the first, project, and then just evaluating what I've done, and just go back to this one and just try to I don't know, I felt like there's like puzzles, or there's like places and things that we missed. And so we're trying to combine them together and in a more like composed way, but kind of become something different in itself. Like it felt alive in the sense of the amount of colors. I started doing stitching. I stitched a lot of the pieces in between the borders. So I imagine in borders. And for myself, I have no background in textiles. So this is something new to myself, considering like I don't have access to a lot of the printmaking equipment or tools and things like that. So I have to use my hands to create these themes, to create these visual dynamics on paper, to you know, step out of my comfort zone from being a printmaker and just see what is accessible for me without certain you know, tools, you know, in my range. So yeah, with Carolyn and I, we just composed this in the way that we envisioned, and it just became something else.
And this is another one where we, again, the details show the color a little bit better, but this gives you an overall picture. And these are waiting to be delivered to the gallery. They were going to go last week and they're going to get delivered this week instead. So, and I believe that's the last of the images we have to show you. So, you know, oh, very quickly. So this is the gallery then is open. The show is opening on the 20th. But I did want to give a call out to you can go to the CDMC, which is the Center for Design and Material Culture, has all the information about this exhibition. There's another really great one in our textile gallery. But there's a lot of events going on with this. This is just a few of them. We have an opening reception. If you're around Madison, you know, come by for that. There's Roberto is doing a printmaking action, going to be silk screening in the hall. We have the live music, John, who painted this guitar, and Alvaro, who's coming up from Mexico, COVID willing, will be performing on March 17th. That's also when the SACWA, the Printmakers Conference, is going to be happening in Madison. So that would be a really great time to come to see a lot of shows about that too. And then on April 8th, we're doing another virtual talk where the four of us that live in Madison are going to walk through the gallery and give a talk there. And also Miriam, again, if COVID willing, Miriam will also be up here, and each of us will take turns at different times of just being in the gallery. We have one piece that's interactive and people can sit down and stitch with us and talk to us, which is really, I think, one of those great things that happens with textiles, where you sit and you work and somebody else is sitting there on their work, and those kind of conversations that come up are really just wonderful and personal and relaxed. And so that's it from our presentation. So we'll see if Astrid or the rest of you have any questions. So
Yes, welcome. What a wonderful thing. My eyes are just feasting. Thank you so much. What a
Do you want me
treat,
to turn
especially
the-
during winter.
want me to turn the PowerPoint off, or should I leave it on, Astrid?
You could probably turn it off and we can see your faces then. Okay. And if we need to refer. I just wanted to, we don't have too many questions. I want to encourage people to put them in the Q&A file. That will help us. We did have a question about, first of all, are we going to be able to see this exhibition virtually at some point?
I think very likely yes, because we have a new center and they've been putting everything virtually online. So I don't remember what the details or what the date is that will happen, but I'm sure that there will be this online, and we'll be sure to pass it along to you, Astrid, and you can make sure it gets to people.
Sure.
However you need to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then Rebecca is wondering, Miriam, what kinds of thread were used in the long textile marigold pieces? I know that I remember, Carolyn, that you actually dyed some natural dyed some silk. Was there other
That was actually all tencel, and those
Oh,
were,
okay.
the tencel was from here, and it was actually MX dyes on those. Some of the Miriam on the others had done natural dyes, but the long woven, the really long pieces, that was all tencel, and that was all threads I had dyed, some in indigo and some in MX.
And for those who don't know, tencel is really also a natural fiber corn-based, isn't it?
I think it's rayon is what I.
Rayon, yeah.
Rayon, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's cellulose based, yeah.
Cellulose-based. Roberto, we have a question on what kind of paper material in the paper making would withstand the stitching and the painting?
So the red paper, the red paper that I use with Carolyn is a mixture of actually clay, pepper flakes, hibiscus flowers, cotton, rag, yeah, and just a lot of dye with it.
Will there be a companion exhibition of this work in Oaxaca? Carolyn, do you know?
Well, we certainly hope so. We don't have anything planned at the moment, but we really would very much like to travel this show, because both the work and the types of topics that it's, you know, touching on is really great. So we don't have anything lined up, but it is something we'd very much like to be able to do. So yeah.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Fantastic. We did have a question. Yes, this Textile Talk will be available on the Textile Talk YouTube playlist, and I'll have some information on that at the end. There's a whole bunch of questions that came in, right? I'm wondering, we do have a question from Anna. Could each of you comment on how the collaborations will shift your individual work? Do you have a sense of that? Carolyn, maybe you want to start.
Well, I was thinking I always start. I was hoping somebody else. But I think I've been collaborating with, you know, Miriam and Tito and a number of others down in Oaxaca for a very long time. And just from the initial collaborations, I found I really, really like to work that way. I like having some idea and then somebody else put something in, and you just don't know what's going to happen. And that was interesting with Roberto, because normally I'm collaborating across distance, but when we're like in the studio, and, you know, I think we collaborate pretty well and don't have a, you know, it's just like, here, do whatever you want, and then I'll get on it and do whatever. There's sometimes we have to work through, but that in the moment interaction was super fun to me. And I really hope to keep doing more of that. So yeah. And Roberto, do you want to talk a little bit?
I've collaborated before with printmakers, but this is completely new to me with textiles, because there's not a lot of printmaking components with the piece and with me and Carolyn. So it was very spontaneous in the sense of like thinking out of the box, how to use materials that are available to us using, you know, scrap fabric, thread, things that we don't think about as much, and just combine them together. Plus, we had limited access to, you know, travel, and, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. So I found it very helpful, and it was a lot of fun. I felt like collaborations are fun. You work with people that you're very fond of and who are mentors to you. So I felt it was great to do that. And for the artisans of Oaxaca, that was a whole different experience for me in itself, like how to have this dialogue from a printmaking standpoint to a textile standpoint, and how to combine those ideas in a way that, you know, it just makes sense to us, you know, and that still retain the traditions of their way of working, as well as like using some of my components through my practice. So it was very interesting, and it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Miriam, do you have something you want to add?
My opinion is the same as Roberto. It's really fun to collaborate with you too. Mm-hmm. And with Carolyn, I'm used to collaborate since almost 10 years. So we have a lot of fun together for many years. We get really excited quickly, so the problem could be just the measure our capacity, and we overwhelm for a bunch of jobs. Even that is just amazing, always collaborating with you, Carolyn. And with Roberto, this is the first time that we worked together, but it was a really fluent work. We shared the same ideas, and we point of view crossed really easily, and I enjoyed it a lot to work with him. And when he was here, we also share another bunch of same thoughts, and it was really funny. I hope this is not the last collaboration that we have. It's always you learn something new when you collaborate with another one. So it's amazing every time that you do.
Wonderful. I think we have time for a couple more questions here and before we need to end. So there is an interesting question. So many segments of the population cannot make it to a museum, for example, the immigrants represented in Roberto's work. Do you have any ideas for addressing that?
I think one of the things I'm actually very interested in, and partly why I do the things like the Community Altar Project, I'm interested in art that is not in museums. And I really, I didn't show pictures of it, but some of the work I like to do that is where people just run across the work, like you were going somewhere and it's there without having to like make this thing to go to a museum. And I've had a lot of people that have come to the exhibitions that are often immigrants, sometimes with documents and sometimes not, and they'll let me know often then they're not, and that they come in and that they feel like these spaces that I've created, like it helps them feel like they're at home. So my own was trying to get it out. And in Oaxaca, what I notice is the art is everywhere. Like everybody sees it. You don't go to a museum. It's like every place. And that's part of the reason why I love it. And I want to go down there, and I'm always trying to bring some of that energy to here. But Roberto, maybe you have you might have more say about that. What about that question?
Yeah, you know, it's nice to have work in museums, but it's not enough for the access of the art in itself, because people don't, like, immigrants don't usually go to museums because, you know, it's not a resource for them in the sense of how it pays the bills or anything. So I think in a sense is that's why craft is so important for the distribution and the making and the producing of work, so people are appreciative more of the quality of the work and where it comes from, who made it. Because it's like, in a sense, essentially people from Central America and parts of Mexico and the Caribbean who travel or going to the United States bring those qualities of the craft, their stories and their belongings, and they pass that on to their children, their generation. So we have to appreciate that. We have to understand where it comes from. And also, like, I think it's also a thing that, like, my mom, she does a lot of lacing. So it's sad that some of my sisters don't, you know, do lacing, but now I'm starting to appreciate what my mom does for embroidering and, you know, stitching. So in itself, I'm taking parts of what my mom does through my work in itself. And that just like gives me a chance to still pass on the traditions within my family in itself.
Yeah, and you know, I want to mention that when I was in Oaxaca, I felt it was such a welcoming place. And we do have questions about whether it's possible to visit artists in Oaxaca. And
yes,
my experience was yes, and they
we can get contacts to people if you're interested. We can give you a number of direct contacts, but there's or contacts. The Textile Museum is also a really great place to start. But we can pull things together if you want. There's so many, you don't have time to visit everyone. So.
Right. So Carolyn, if someone wants to contact you, I already suggested in chat, they contact you through your website. So
yeah, that sounds good. Actually, just through my email is better. I don't know
Okay.
where my email from my website goes, but.
Okay, so we put that in there. I don't have it on my link here, but we'll figure that out.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, well, I know we could go on and see wonderful things. I think this is really inspiring to many of us. It'll be very interesting to see what becomes of this pandemic project and how you bring that forward into life beyond the current situation and how it continues in different ways. So thank you to all of the presenters. I want to just thank you again to the sponsors and to SACWA for hosting us. This recording will be available on YouTube in the next week. It's on the YouTube playlist. If you search for the YouTube Textile Talk playlist, you'll find it, and you'll also find 1.5 years of other recordings. I just wanted to put in a plug for SDA's Community Ties Conference coming up January 22nd to 29th with exciting speakers panels, meet the maker sessions, meetups, and it's 5 o'clock somewhere party. The conference will be recorded and available for attendees for 2 months. More information is located on a link on SDA's homepage, and scholarships are available. Next Wednesday, Textile Talks hosts Conversations with the Artists, Intersect Chicago, Part 2, sponsored by SACWA. And now we'll sign off with greetings to all of our audience from all of us. And thank you once again for attending. Thank you, Roberto, Miriam, and Carolyn.
Oh,
Thank
bye.
you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.